This is Fat to Fierce. Welcome to the Confidence Chronicles. I'm your host, Amy English. Join me on this empowering adventure towards a healthier relationship with food, body, and self, one delicious bite at a time. Hello, welcome to the Confidence Chronicles. I'm your host, Amy English, and to kick things off today, I'm going to share with you a quote that I found as I was scrolling social media earlier this morning. Here's what it said. Eating is one of the kindest things you can do for yourself every day, or one of the most self-destructive. You choose. And of course, I shared this on all my social media channels because it really resonated with me. And I think it resonated most because, for me personally, as someone who struggled with emotional eating and binge eating for a very long time, as you by now well know, I can absolutely see how, the difference. It's the difference between nourishing your body, right? Between eating food that feels good, eating food that works well for your body, right? Absolutely one of the kindest things. Paying attention to your hunger cues, paying attention to what physical hunger feels like in your body and eating accordingly, right? To reach that point of satisfaction. That is kindness. That is self-care. I mean, that's self-love, really. And on the flip side of that, with it being self-destructive, hello, right? Stress eating, mindless munching, binge eating. Binge eating for me was absolutely self-destructive, and it is for a lot of people. And so as I was reading this and that last two-word sentence, you choose. Because here's the thing, and this is kind of what here's the meat and potatoes of what I want to get into today. I use a lot of food analogies for an emotional eating coach. Goodness. Anyway, there is an illusion, and it feels very real. And I remember it, okay? But there is this illusion that food is in control when you're struggling with different eating habits, right? Like stress eating, like emotional eating, like binge eating. And as a reminder, yes, stress eating is a form of emotional eating. It is eating to relieve or distract from the feeling of stress, right? So when you feel stressed, it's like, hand over the cookies and no one gets hurt. I really need something sweet. I had a really bad day. Stress eating is a form of emotional eating. And when you're in that pattern of using food for whatever reason, it can feel like food is in control. The cookies are calling your name. Food is in charge. And so what really struck me about that quote was, as I mentioned, you choose. You get to choose whether eating is going to be one of the kindest things you can do for yourself every day, or if it's going to be one of the most self-destructive. But here's the thing. When you're in the midst of the habit, it doesn't feel like you can choose. And I really think that's what struck me. Now, me talking in this microphone on this podcast today, 2025 version of Amy English, knows you can absolutely choose. But me, the version of me from, 1985 to 2016, didn't know you could choose. Didn't realize I could choose. I really thought I was at the mercy of food, and I thought that for a really long time. And I know that a lot of other people think that as well. And I mean, truthfully, it wasn't until 2013 that I actually had the thought of, Oh, I got to do something about my stress eating, right? If you remember, it was in a previous episode when I shared all about my cancer diagnosis. It was at that moment that I was like, I got to do something about food. I got to do something about this habit of stress eating. I don't need another diet. I got to figure out why I feel like I have no control around food, why it feels like food is always in charge. Food is calling my name. I've often described that it felt like a trance I was under where, food would enter my mind and I couldn't focus on anything else until I went and ate that food, right? Or ate a whole bunch of other stuff trying to avoid whatever food I was craving or thinking about in the moment, whatever urge I was having, because that's a thing too. And I remember it well. Let's say, for example, I would have had the idea to eat cookies or a brownie or something sweet, right? And I would try to ignore it and I would try to fight against it and I would try to focus and not think about it. And then I would find myself eating, oh, let's have something healthier, right? Let's like eat all this other stuff and still think about the brownie or the whatever. And eventually I'd end up eating that too. So it was just this like really wicked trance is a great way to describe it, is what it felt like I had no control. And so that here comes this illusion that food is in charge. And I'm not alone in feeling that way when I used to feel that way, right? There's a lot of people who are kind of stuck in this trap, feeling like food controls them, stuck in this trance. And we know this. Well, I mean, I know this because of what I do for a living, and these are the people that I work with, right? But we also know this just based on all the diet remedies that are out in the world, especially all these new GLP-1 medications, because these medications are quieting that food noise, which is the one thing that people are struggling with. And the unfortunate part about these medications is that once you come off of them for whatever reason, if you haven't addressed the food, the relationship with food and the habits and the urges and the noise and all that other stuff, if you haven't addressed that for yourself, if you've relied on the medication solely to quiet that noise, then we know once you come off that medication, it just all comes back with a vengeance. And so this is just a reason why, listen, I have several clients who are taking those GLP-1 medications, and I'm happy for them because it is helping them in the world of weight loss. However, they've had to do a lot of work together with me, one-on-one, of changing their relationship with food and understanding their cravings and understanding the food noise and all this other stuff. They've done the work to heal their relationship with food and their body so that they can get to their goal and come off the medication and know that they've got this, right? They're confident, they're comfortable, they're not worried about the food noise coming back because they have addressed that piece, right? That's one of the healthy habits you can build even while you're on this medication, of healing your relationship with food and healing your relationship with your body, because these two things go together, as you know, if you've listened to any of the previous episodes of this podcast. Okay. So we know that a lot of people feel like food controls them. Okay. This is a very common thing. We see this it's a known thing. And there's a lot of common triggers that can lead to this, right? That are tied to this. And those triggers are the emotions I've talked about already: stress, boredom. Boredom is such a huge one because people don't like feeling bored. And here's what I will tell you about that. And this is something that I say to my teenagers all the time when they tell me that they're bored. My response is always, good. You're bored? Good. Great. Learn to feel bored. Learn to feel bored without having to do something to avoid it, right? Because when you can allow the feeling of boredom, you're not going to feel like you need to escape it by doing something like turning to food. when you can just acknowledge that boredom is a very natural feeling that we all have from time to time. I mean, think about it. Let's just think about this for a second. Of course, there's going to be times in your life when you feel bored. Like, it would be weird if we didn't. It would just be bizarre if we were busy constantly in our waking hours, right? There are going to be times when we feel bored. And I think our society today, with social media and with streaming channels, and like there's just always something to do, and people don't like to feel bored. And I think sometimes a lot of times it's because they don't like the kinds of um thoughts and things that their mind is going to produce in these moments of boredom. But honestly, when you can learn to be bored and just be okay with it and just allow it to be without having to fill that space, like, can be really helpful. And then you don't feel like you need to fill that space with food, okay? Because again, I got on a little tangent there, but turning to food as a form of entertainment when you're feeling bored is a very common thing, and it's not helpful. So again, another common trigger, right? So stress, other kinds of emotions, and also just ingrained habits. Because here's the thing: when you're someone who struggles with stress eating, for example, I'll use stress eating because that's a super common one. Although bored eating is also equally as common, but whatever. I'm going to talk about stress eating. When you are someone who started turning to food at an early age, many years ago, to find some relief from whatever you were feeling, right? And so food kind of became the thing. Food became the go-to. Food became the habit. Eating became the habit. And that habit just got ingrained over the years, right? It's almost like you don't even realize what happened. It just kind of happened and it just continued. And so what happens is you get to this point, and I know this very clearly for my own personal experience. You get to this point where it's become such an autopilot response turning to food. It's become so automatic that you don't even think about it. You just do it. So you just automatically turn to food when you've had a stressful day, or you've received stressful news, or you've received upsetting news, or something happened that you didn't like. You got upset, whatever. You just automatically go to food without even thinking about it. And a lot of times it's not until after you've had your moment, you're eating, maybe it turned into a binge, right? Because that's also very common, where an emotional eat will turn into a binge eat. Because remember, friends, emotional eating and binge eating are two, I like to describe them as two separate ways of eating, right? Because not every emotional eat turns into a binge. I can remember a time not so long ago when we had a death in the family and all I wanted was some chocolate covered strawberries and frosting. That was an emotional eat, okay? I had like 3 chocolate covered strawberries and a couple tablespoons of frosting. That wasn't a binge, okay? A binge would have been the entire cake with like a dozen chocolate covered strawberries and maybe some chocolate chip cookies to go with it, okay? That would have been a binge for me back in the day. So, where was I going with this? So, an emotional eat is not always necessarily a binge, right? I think that's just a really important distinction, because there are going to be times in life when we do, feel sad about something and we want a cookie. Okay, it just that it's not a problem, right? Where it can become a quote unquote problem is when it feels like it's out of control, when it feels like we don't have any control, and when it spirals into a binge. That is where we want to kind of correct this. Or like when you're having that stress eat or that emotional eat every single day and you just feel like you can't stop it. I've talked to people before who worked from home and they just disliked doing certain tasks. And so then they would find themselves, grazing in the kitchen for a long time, just trying to avoid that task. And that was getting in the way of their health and weight goals, right? So that's something we want to take a look at. That's something we want to understand better with curiosity and compassion so that we can change that. But you've got to be willing to recognize and realize that this is a habit, okay? It's an ingrained habit. I think that's where I started before I went on my tangent. It's an ingrained habit that has probably been going on for a long time. I know I've asked this question before, and I will ask it again, and I will probably ask it in future episodes. What is your earliest recollection of stress eating or of binge eating? Like, what's your earliest memory of it? That's such a helpful question to go and explore with curiosity and compassion. Okay, we want to leave any judgment and shame off to the side for this because that's not going to help. You want to explore this question with curiosity and compassion because that information is going to be really helpful, because chances are whatever memory comes to your mind when you ask yourself that question. Okay, so let me just do this as a just kind of walk you through it. So you ask the question, what is the earliest memory I have of eating emotionally or binge eating, right? For me, that earliest memory was me getting off the school bus, going into the house and sneaking whatever baked goods were in the kitchen or ice cream or whatever, right? It was sneaking food after a long day at school. That was my earliest memory when I was asked this question for the first time, 10 years ago. So you ask yourself that question and you really sit and you think about it. And once you identify that earliest memory that you have, your earliest recollection, what was happening in the moment? What was going on? How old were you? Where were you? What was going on in your life? Were there things you were feeling? Were there things you were experiencing? Were there things you were trying to avoid or feel better about? Like, I know for me, sneaking food was for a couple reasons. Number one, it was a little bit of a rebellion because, I was too chubby. And I shouldn't be eating those things, right? It was also, I got teased a lot in school, hence the reason I was put on a diet. So I was teased in school and made fun of, called Miss Piggy, stuff like that. So food was relief. So it was rebellion. It was relief. It was like really just a soft place to land after a frustrating day at school as a, third or fourth grader. I mean, I know it sounds sad, but like finding this information is helpful because then I'm able to see it and be like, okay, how is that habit still at play today? How is that still happening today? And here's the deal. It's gone on for so long that it has in many ways become an ingrained habit that is just what I was automatically doing at the time. Okay. It's kind of like I was still that little girl getting off the school bus looking for something soft and sweet. Okay. Even as a 30-something-year-old, right? The pattern was still very similar, even though the circumstances have changed, i.e., my age, I was at work instead of school, that kind of thing. So really just being able to see how this ingrained habit has grown over time and strengthened over time. And what happens then is it gives us this, it feels like food is in control, and it's an illusion, because the truth of the matter is food can't be in control. It can't. It's food, right? The truth is that you are in control even when it doesn't feel like it. And that's the piece I really want to hone in on right now on this episode, because I know, listen, if you're someone who has struggled with food and these habits for a long time, and you hear me telling you the truth is that you are in control, you may not want to believe me, or you may think that I don't know what I'm talking about. I get it, okay? As I've shared before, I was in that space too where I didn't think I was in control. I thought food was in charge. And so this is going to take a willingness to accept that maybe there is some truth here, that maybe it's possible that you are in charge. And if that's the case, then you do get to choose. If that doesn't feel true for you today, it's okay. Just sit with it, okay? Your willingness to just sit with the idea that you are in control and you can possibly choose, just being willing to sit with that possibility is enough to open the door to an alternate truth. Okay? A truth that you are in charge, that you are in control, that you can make a choice. Okay? So that's what I wanted to hone in on there, because you are in control even when it doesn't feel like it. And that is just really important to remember. And I think it can also be helpful to look at other situations in your life that don't involve food or weight. Okay? Like that don't involve food, your body, and your weight journey. What other areas of your life do you see that you are in control, right? What are other areas where you can see that you do make a choice, that you do choose things, right? Might be purchasing clothes, or it might be just basic things like brushing your teeth, like average hygiene type things, right? Going to work. Okay, that's a bad example because we don't always have a choice, although that would be nice. Okay, I'm not even going to go there because I feel like I just opened a can of worms with that one. But maybe what you make for dinner tonight, okay? Or what you do over the weekend, what your plans are, things like that. What you're reading, what you're watching on TV, who you're paying attention to on social media, okay? All things that you have control over, okay? So see how any of that feels true. And what I'm going to invite you to do is just for a moment, realize the other areas where you do have control and you do have a choice. How could that also be transferred to food, to eating? Okay. So the next time you find yourself standing in front of the pantry, or the next time you see yourself, or you're able to catch yourself in the pattern of emotional eating or binge eating, or even overeating, okay? Remember the 3 types of eating: overeating, emotional eating, binge eating. I did an episode on those 3 forms of eating way back in the day. So go look for it if you didn't listen to it, because it was a good one. But so even when you catch yourself in one of those forms of eating that you would like to change, okay? That's the important piece here. You want to change this. Just check in with yourself and ask yourself, why am I choosing to do this right now? Again, we're asking this very straightforward, very clear, with curiosity and compassion, not with shame and judgment. Okay. This isn't the blame game. We're not asking it like, why are you doing this again? No, it's just a very clear, why are you doing this again? Why did you choose this? Why did you choose to overeat? Why did you choose to stress eat? Why did you choose to binge? And just see what the answer is. It could be that you were trying to avoid a perceived negative emotion, or it could be that this is just a habit you've been doing for a really long time and this is your go-to and you just did it without thinking. And both of those responses could be true at the same time, okay? Could be that it's part of an ingrained habit of using food when you feel stressed, all right? Great, noted. What do you want to do different? You can even ask in the moment, like, do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to continue in this cycle right now? Do I want to do something different? I mean, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for yourself when you're changing these habits with food is to interrupt yourself in the moment of the eating. Okay. So even if, like, let's just use overeating as an example. Let's say you're sitting at dinner and you're having this delicious meal and it's so good. and you're satisfied. Like, on the hunger scale, you're like at a +2 or a +3, okay? But it's so good that you just want to have more, okay? And so you're going to go and you're going to get seconds, all right? And you're going to sit down at the table and you're about to continue eating your seconds even though you're getting full, right? You can stop yourself in the moment. Just check in. Do I want to do this right now? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Is it just because it tastes good? Is it because I'm enjoying the company at dinner right now? Is it because I don't have anything else going on right now? I don't have anything else to do? Like what? Like what? Or is it just a habit because I get seconds every night? Check in with yourself and start asking these questions just to collect the information. And then you get to decide if you want to continue doing it, which is fine. You're choosing, or if you want to choose to do something different. Listen, I'm just going to say this. It is tedious. It can be obnoxious, and it can be frustrating. But if you are willing to continue questioning yourself and getting curious with these eating habits, this is how you're going to change them. Okay. There's got to be a willingness to want to do this. If there's not, maybe come back when you are willing to do this, when you want to do this, right? If you are okay with your eating habits and you're fine, well, then you're probably not even listening to this episode. Maybe you are. I don't know, whatever. But there's got to be a willingness. There's got to be a desire. There's got to be a want to change these habits, right? And with that, curiosity comes in. Okay. And everything I'm explaining in this episode with all of these questions is all about practicing the pause. I mean, it really is. Because even when you're in the midst of an eat, whether it's an emotional eat, an overeat, or a binge eat, and you pause just for that split second, even to just say, what am I doing right now? As you know, I can remember doing this as I was shoveling in handfuls of my kids' Teddy Grahams after they had gone to bed. Okay. I'd be this was part of my habit. Put them to bed. They were little. Okay. I would put them to bed. I would come down the stairs and I would be standing in front of the pantry, searching for something. And I would settle on their Teddy Grahams. And I would be putting handfuls of Teddy Grahams in my face. And as I was starting to do this work, this is when I would check in and be like, what am I doing right now? Is I had a handful of Teddy Grahams like going into my mouth. Like, Amy, what are you doing right now? Like, what's happening? Do you want to do this? Is this what you want to do? It's okay if you do, but is this really what you want to do? And the more I practiced doing that, checking in with myself, even in the moment, the easier it got to pause, to stop myself, to check in, to see the habit as it was happening in the moment. And this is why I say this can sometimes be super powerful when you can start pausing yourself in the moment, see what's happening, check in and make a decision, decide if you want to keep doing this, decide if you want to keep doing this behavior or stop or do something different, right? The easier it's going to get. And then before you know it, you're no longer stopping at the pantry after you put the kids to bed. That was my experience. All of a sudden, I was able to stop myself enough and check in that I was able to change that ingrained habit. I was able to shift and do something different. Maybe go watch a show with my husband or go back to my office and catch up on some work or do some journaling, right? But the whole reason I was able to change that is because I was willing to pause and check in and ask the question. And I think one of the reasons it can be challenging to do this is because of the shame that we feel about what we're doing with food, especially in the moment. Okay. So if that lands for you, if you feel shame towards your behaviors and eating, I want to invite you to very gently acknowledge how that shame may be interfering with your ability to change and make a choice. Okay. The shame is not helpful and it's not even warranted. I tend to think that even that is part of the habit. At least it was for me. Let's now beat myself up for what I just ate. Kind of went hand in hand with the act of eating, right? Eat the food, feel out of control, beat myself up for doing it, rinse and repeat, staying in that same cycle. So there's a willingness to want to change the habits with food, have a healthier relationship with food, do feel like you are in control, feel like you have control, right? Realize that food is not in charge. So that's part of it. And then there's also recognizing that you don't deserve the shame. You don't deserve to beat yourself up. That's making me emotional. Probably because I lived it, right? I remember what it was like. And no, it wasn't helpful. It's never helpful to shame or beat yourself up after no matter what you eat. And I think that that shame is part of what could be fueling the pattern, right? So just again, as with everything, see what feels true for you, see what resonates. And if it doesn't, toss it aside, right? Then that's not for you. But I just know that a lot of people, and I think this is another reason why a lot of people, it takes them a lot to reach out and book that connection call with me. I mean, I talk to people who have been listening to me for years, whether on Facebook or on this podcast, for the last year and change. It takes a while before they take that next step to book that connection call. And I recognize that because there is a lot of shame that is wrapped up in these eating patterns that we so desperately want to change. And I think that's one of the reasons why I talk so much about my personal experience, because I want folks to understand, like, you're not alone. Like, I was right there in it. I was in the thick of it. I have thrown food in the garbage before and dug it back out. A cake. I mean, it was in the container, but still, okay? I can clearly remember doing that way back in the day after my husband and I were first married. I mean, I'm sure I told this story about the cake where I was going to the store nearly every day. It was when we first moved to Connecticut, and I was going to the store nearly every single day and buying this little individual birthday cake. And it got so bad that he was like, oh, like he'd come home from work. And at the time I wasn't working because we had just moved to Connecticut and I was looking for a job. I was very homesick. I was very depressed. I mean, this was like 25 years ago. Okay. And so I would go to this every day. It was a routine. I would go to the store, I would get the cake, I would come home and I would eat it and I would watch TV. And wow, this is before social media. Woo! Anyway, so he would come home from work and be like, "Oh, you got a cake again?" Because the container would be there. And so I got real good at cutting up the container and throwing it in the garbage, and burying it underneath so that he wouldn't see the container when he got home from work. This is a very true story. Okay. And then, but then there was this one time where I did I had gotten home with the cake in the container and I was like, I'm not going to do this again. And I threw the cake in the garbage in the container, and sure enough, a few hours later, went back, fished it out, and proceeded to eat the cake and then cut up the container and bury it in the garbage. So I share these stories with you. It really does feel like a whole different version of me. And that's just a testament to the healing and to the fact that I'm even okay sharing this story. I don't feel embarrassment about it anymore. I look at this as, wow, I fixed this. I healed from this. And now I have the honor. This does make me emotional. Woo! I have the honor of helping other people do the same. Because I really do feel like this was such a gift for me to figure out how to overcome the habits with food that were heavily impacting me in multiple different ways, emotionally, mentally, and physically for a very long time. I found that missing piece to fix this, to heal from this. I figured it out with help. And for me to just sit with that, it feels weird. I just feel very called to share these stories and to share these tips and just to share this information so that I can help other people. Because I sure as hell know I was not alone. I am not alone, and you're not alone either. Okay? All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for today. So there was more I was going to share, but we're going to save that for next week. All right. Hey, listen, I hope you have a great week. As always, I hope this was helpful. And please follow along, follow the podcast. All right. Because it just helps get it out to more people. All right. Have a good one. Are you ready to break free from stress eating and body shaming? It's time to get fierce. Fat to Fierce is a self-paced program that helps you build a new foundation of strength and balance without the toxic dieting mindset. This non-diet approach focuses on mindful eating, body acceptance, and lasting transformation. It's time to reclaim your power and find peace with food, your body, and yourself. Visit amyenglishcc.com to get started today.